Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. Andy, I think the thing with this trailer is, and maybe why people had trouble with it, is there's a hint that Uhura and Scooty are in a relationship.
You think that's what the problem was?
I think that's where the whole thing started. I don't think anybody saw that coming, and they couldn't quite get it.
It was a snowball effect from there.
It's exactly what it was. The snowball effect of the Scooty Uhura, the Scoohura.
It was like, you know, taking fan fiction to the next level. You've got Uhura and Scooty together. You've got
right.
Captain Chekhov.
Oh,
you know, there's
it becomes more and more fan fiction as we go along.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
Goodness, that is what happened. All of these movies. Wow. What do you think about the trailer? Does it? My question for you was, does it finally give away too much? Or do you think, oh no, it's so great, it's perfect?
I didn't think it gave too much away as far as, because your concern was it gave too much away of the family relationship between Spock and Cybok.
Spock will have to go back to uncover a secret, and he holds the baby shadow, the little.
It does show the baby shadow, but it's like I don't know. I was a little torn if it gave too much away, because it's like, that it's a Vulcan, that somehow it's connected to Spock's past, but it didn't say how. And you're right, maybe showing the baby shadow was a little too much, but
All right.
I don't know. I didn't think it was too problematic. And it set the story up well. It seemed to really focus the story on a lot of Vulcans. Like, everybody seemed concerned about Vulcans in the trailer.
Well, that's good, because there are a lot of Vulcans to be concerned about. No, there are a few Vulcans, and they should be concerned about a lot.
Yes.
There should be a high degree of concern spread over a few Vulcans. That's what I mean to say.
The trailer also seems to emphasize the humor factor.
To its credit, did you hear that question mark?
Question mark? Well, it's interesting because Paramount apparently pushed them to put comedy in at every opportunity, because they felt that the comedy in Star Trek IV was one of the things that turned it into the profit center that it was. So they said, every chance you have, put more humor in it. And that was the edict given to the writers on this one, and they took it to heart.
As it turns out, a lesson was learned by all.
Do you think the studio learned anything?
No, I don't. Well, perhaps. And that for that, we will wait until we'll table for next week. But I do think that, well, I'm just going to say it, and then we're going to move on. I believe that this film is, in some part, unjustly maligned by Star Trek fans, and I'm not going to hang my whole reputation on making that case, but I was deeply surprised at how much I enjoyed the movie. Now, to the point of the trailer did not get me there.
The trailer definitely does not take you to that special place.
Does not take you to the special place. Only Scooty Uhura can do that.
From a relaxing vacation on Earth.
Greetings, Captain. I do not think you realize the gravity of your situation.
To the most perilous reaches of space. Only one crew dare travel where no man has ever gone before.
We'll need all the power you can muster, mister.
On a desolate planet, a renegade Vulcan seeks ultimate knowledge.
To find it, we'll need a starship.
And he will stop at nothing to get it.
I dreamt that a madman had taken over the Enterprise. You look like you've just seen a ghost.
Perhaps I have, Captain. Our destination is the planet Shakari, Eden, at the center of the galaxy.
The center of the galaxy can't be reached.
If you ask me, and you haven't, I think this is a terrible idea. We're bound to bump into the Klingons. Remain on course.
To Kirk, he's a fanatic to be fought.
You know we'll never make it through the Great Barrier.
I say the danger is an illusion.
To the crew, he's a mystic to be followed.
Cybok has simply put us in touch with feelings that we've always been afraid.
I have to get back to the transporter.
To Spock, he's the past he must confront.
Shoot him! You know I'm right. Spock, my only concern is getting the ship back. And you're either with me or you're not.
Put him in the brig with Captain Kirk.
I'm a prisoner on my own ship.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, Shatner takes the wheel with the fifth entry into the Star Trek series, 1989's The Final Frontier. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you are a regular listener of the show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. Get the good stuff like access to the show Drafts podcast feed, our exclusive Saturday matinee show only available to Patreon members, and more. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel and donate. We appreciate the support.
Star Trek V, Andy, unjustly maligned. I said it. Do you agree?
Well, I've been telling you from the beginning that this was your favorite.
You have been telling me that. You have been telling me that. Go ahead, because I know this was, I feel like, in fact, there is a contender for your favorite Star Trek film in The Final Frontier.
You think so, huh?
Because of all that humor, that juicy humor.
The juicy humor, the Uhura's fan dance. There's a lot going on in here to love, Pete.
Andy, it's a pool table that's a pool.
Who'd have thunk it?
Am I right?
You are so right. But you are right in the fact that I watched this and I'm like, what is going on? As bad as so much of it is, I really loved everything else. Like, I was really shocked because I'm like, there's a really, really good Star Trek movie in here. It's just buried under a bunch of bad stuff, unfortunately. I think it got off to the wrong start. And I think it just didn't get the support it needed. And I think it just kind of fell apart, unfortunately. But there's a lot of the core of it, I think, is great.
I think it's a story that I don't know if it was necessarily ahead of its time, but maybe not just of its time. Think about how appropriate a story like this is today, right? A messianic leader who comes with great grand promises of salvation and through just sheer force of will is able to amass enough of a following to take hold of great power, and then only to discover that it was just a skeptic's dream come true, that it was all just a fraud.
Whoa. Are you talking about Oprah? I feel like there's a connection to something going on in the present day.
You read me like a book, Andy. Like a book. This is what I'm saying. Like, I watched this movie and I thought, wow, this is amazingly resonant if you just peel away the stuff that you don't like. So the cultural sort of, from a cultural angle, I think this movie actually really does hold up. And you could take that story, like we said about Khan, like one of the things that makes the movie so great is you can take it out of the starship and you can put it in a wholly different context, and this is an interesting story, right? I get there are elements of it that I think are ridiculous, elements of it I think are unneeded, but that part of it I really celebrated this time. Now, it's also the production design, the art design. I mean, we're seeing more and more of the Michael Okuda led design that really comes out in obviously Next Generation. But this was his second film on Trek. You can feel the art design kind of come around. The ship design, the general feel and substance of the Enterprise this is entering an era of my favorite sort of existence in the space of Star Trek. And so, I feel like we've sort of grown into it. It is a different bridge again, which is enormously frustrating since we only had the bridge of the Enterprise, for like a minute in the last movie, and yet they changed it this time. I don't get it. But it was very frustrating. What's fascinating about it is watching the behind the scenes stuff and hearing interviews with Harv and with Shatner. I feel like I actually liked this movie even more than they did.
Yeah, right.
Like they're all just sort of Star Trek V. There are a lot of problems with it, but what?
I think Shatner seems to like it. I think he's the one who is the kind of the holdout, saying, "Hey, I kind of like it." But Ralph Winter, I mean, he's one of the executive producers, and he's just like, "Hey, I've always been an even number guy."
Yeah, right.
These are your movies, dude.
These are your movies, man.
Terrible.
No, that's terrible. And to your point, Shatner's. Did you see his joyful act of creation speech?
Mm-hmm.
Where he says, this is, I am great at denial. When stuff's going wrong, I can move right through it. This was, during the process, this was a joyful act of creation. We all had a really good time doing it, and really, it's a gift of hindsight. I get the feeling that they're able to see where things went south. And to all of their credit, they have the same problems with it that I do.
That is something. Yes, it is.
Any reason to talk about Klingons?
I loved these Klingons. Like, these are like some of my favorite Klingons to watch. I thought these two, like, kind of character actors who came onto this movie, took it to heart, like whole hog, to be these Klingons. They learned Klingon like to a perfect degree, where they were like, growling it out every time they spoke. Todd Bryant as Captain Claw and Spice Williams as Vixis. They developed a whole backstory between themselves. Like, they went whole hog on this, and I loved every bit of moments that they had on screen. They were just fantastic, and probably some of my favorite Klingons in the Star Trek universe.
I am surprised
to
hear you say that. I am surprised to hear, and it's not it's not because necessarily they were not great as the Klingons. They're fun as the Klingons. I think they're woefully underused.
Well, sure.
They're an artificial nemesis that we didn't need, and I think it's that is a central sort of failing, is having ultimately, good actors playing good Klingons, and not really exploring it.
No, absolutely.
Because we already had the nemesis.
You had 3 nemesis.
We had nemesis.
Nemesises.
We had so many of the nemesis.
They developed a lot of issues for Kirk and his crew to battle against, and certainly the Klingon element was probably not necessary. But if I get to watch these two, I guess I was okay with it. But yes, from a storytelling perspective, it was they were poorly integrated into the structure of the story.
The movie was actually penned by David Lowery, but mostly the idea came from Shatner and Bennett, and the three of them are story credit, and Lowery writing it. And Lowery this was his first movie after Dreamscape. Dreamscape?
Oh, yeah.
What? I love that movie. I'm never going to watch it again because of that.
Because
because I love
terrible.
it so much. This was now I'm not entirely sure when this was being written. Do you know the exact dates of the writer's strike? Was it the whole year that this was being written?
I don't know. I think it was 88 though, and because they were shooting this in 88. And
yeah.
So
that is where some of the criticism or some of the critique comes, that maybe had this not been in the middle of the writer's strike, had they not been sort of desperate to get it done, to as a result of what was going on with the strike, that we would have had ultimately a better film, that some of the silliness of the humor would not have snuck through.
That's always possible when it comes to writer strikes and these studios who are adamant about pushing these things through anyway. It's one of those things. It's like I don't know. They obviously have things that they have to meet. They have money they have to spend. Just whatever the reasoning is, they decide to move forward with projects anyway. Probably to tell the writers, see, we don't need you. That's, I'm sure, a part of it. Unfortunately, in the end, it generally results in projects that struggle quite a bit. I mean, this was something that happened during Quantum of Solace in the Bond universe, and plenty of other projects that are out there that have been affected one way or another because of these writer strikes. Yes, this likely would have been better if they had either held off on it or if they had just waited until the strike was over. Who knows, though? We don't have that product, so.
We don't have the benefit of that. Obviously, we do have a lot of folks who are complaining about it. Shatner says that we weren't served by our special effects, and yet this is a movie that demanded special effects and attention from special effects. I found this fascinating when you look at Ralph Winter and you hear Ralph Winter talk about the way what he learned from this film in terms of keeping an eye on effects. In particular, the effects work that's going on, that this was happening under the guise of a guy. The only name I heard brought up was Bran Farren. And Ralph Winter says, Bran Farren had a lot of enthusiasm, but he was in Long Island. And then Harve Bennett says, I think he just lost energy in the project. And I have never heard an individual called out by name as a guy who is, at least in some part responsible for a film's central effects sequence not working.
Apparently, he did a test of the God light, that kind of the giant white light that we see at the end, and that's what kind of sold them on using this guy. I guess they didn't go to Industrial Light and Magic as they had on the previous films because they did not have availability in their schedule. They were working on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and they couldn't jump onto this. And so they had to shop around and find somebody else to handle the effects. And so this was the guy they ended up with. And it sounds like he sold them a bill of goods that said he could do the work. Yeah, and I mean, I watched the same stuff you did. It sounds like they kind of kept pushing to get stuff, and he just couldn't deliver. It sounds it's a tough way to go, and it's effects is one of those tricky things where you kind of have to rely on them to be doing stuff and getting you stuff, and just hoping that things are happening. There was Shatner says there's this one moment where he asked somebody about some of the effects, and he's just like, when am I going to see this particular set of effects? And they're like, oh, you saw that 2 weeks ago. He's like, I did. And he's like, I don't know if they were lying or misinformed, or I was confused and forgetful. He's like, to this day, I still don't have any idea if I ever saw those effects or not. And he said, I think that Shatner really had learned a lot about the struggle of being a director and just how every single decision on the set really falls to you. And it sounded, I mean, he had done it before. He had directed episodes of that cop show of his. And
I don't think we've actually said it yet. I don't think we've actually, is that a thing? We're going to hang our hats on that?
I think we shouldn't.
Okay. All right, good.
If he won't say it, Pete,
then
we won't
say it.
He had never directed this scope before, and trying to handle all of these different things, it sounded pretty kind of overwhelming. And when it came to these things like these effects and things, it's just like all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that's fine. And you kind of have to just go along with some of this stuff and hope that it's going to work. And I guess in the case of Bran Farron and his company, a lot of things didn't, and so a lot of the effects in here really do have kind of an unfinished feel, which is it's unfortunate.
He was on special visual effects for Altered States. I'm a big fan of that movie. He went on to Death Trap, Places in the Heart, Little Shop of Horrors, Making Mr. Right before he landed on Star Trek V. After this, boy, he hasn't done much. Second Sight, and that was his last visual effects credit. Seriously, have you ever heard in this kind of context, in the special features, an individual called out by name like this? I've never heard that.
No, it's just one of those things where, there clearly were issues.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And they have to shift the blame to somebody, and it sounds like Bran did not deliver, and so they had to live with some effects that oddly do look like Altered States. When you're watching the trip through the Great Barrier, it kind of
looks like Altered States. But you know what's interesting about that, Andy? Like watching the end of the film, not knowing this, it absolutely fits within the scope and scale of Star Trek effects. Like there was nothing in the God thing at the end where I thought, wow, that is a terrible effect even for Star Trek, right?
I think it was okay. I think some of it was probably underwhelming, and that's the thing. I mean, in the world of effects, you're always trying to impress. And if your effects just feel very standard or kind of flat, it's like, part of that, then to a certain extent you did fail, right? It's like, you're not standing out in any way.
But so compare that to Shatner's description of what he wanted to have happen.
Yeah, so Shatner was wanting, after the defeat, or the kind of the initial defeat of the God being, I guess it was as Shatner or Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were escaping, all of these demons were going to come up out of the ground and start pursuing them. They couldn't quite figure out how to do that, so they changed them to these rock men, and then it was like, okay, we're gonna have 10 rock men, and then all of a sudden they said, well, you don't have the budget to do 10 rock men, we can do 5 rock men, and then it was 3, and then it was 1. You could have 1 rock man, and so he's like, fine, okay, because it was like a $350,000 costume to kind of create this thing.
For one of the rock men.
For one rock man.
Yeah.
And so they create this Rockman costume, and they do these tests, And it's terrible. It is just the most embarrassing costume ever. It's just dumb. And Shatner's like, I can't use that. And so he had to kind of revamp the whole ending of the script. And that's why he's kind of like, on the run, and the God thing pops back up again, and the Vulcans come up and shoot it. And it's, kind of just a sparky explosion. And then he's beamed out. There's not much to it. It's pretty flat. And that is kind of the curse of a project that is having, aside from story issues, because of the writer's strike, it's having budget issues because of things like this happening. And you're just kind of working on the fly. And, I think Shatner was really put in a really tough spot that he had to deal with situations like this that I can't blame that completely on him either, because if he was sold a bill of goods saying you can have 10 Rockmen, he's like, great, let's have 10 Rockmen. And then and the whole, end of the script is built around that. And then they come to him and say, oh, I'm sorry, you only get one Rockman. It's like,
and it can't breathe fire. It can't have any fire near it, when its central purpose is to look like the ninth circle of hell, a lava Rockman. That's how it was originally pitched, was that these emerge from fire and brimstone. And now it's, well, we can't do the fire. It'll melt the actor's face.
That's and that to me, that does not fall on Shatner.
No.
I wholeheartedly blame Ralph Winter for that.
And that's just also mostly because he was kind of a smart aleck about it.
He is, and as the person who's really kind of, it sounded like he was kind of the line producer, the one who's responsible for the budget and everything.
Yep.
The line items fall on him, so
that falls on him.
I blame old Ralph.
We're going to talk about the very opening scene in the deep scene dive, but the scene after that, the where we roll over credits, where they apparently have a lot of footage of Yosemite, and they used a lot of it. And so here we have the opening credits. It's not over space. It's not over clouds like it was in The Voyage Home. It is through Yosemite. So it's the first time I think we're on the ground for a credits roll. And I think it's actually quite elegant. I think it's lovely. And, it's a nice tour. It's a very grounding sort of element. And then we get to, the captain climbing El Capitan. What do you think of this opening sequence?
Here's what I think about it. There are a lot of elements I like in this opening sequence. I like that they're at Yosemite. I like that it's still a park that people go and climb in. I think it says something about a story starting with, this captain whose, job is to go where no one has gone before. And here he is doing a free climb up El Capitan. I think that's really interesting. I like the fact that these three characters who we've grown to love, and we know that they love each other, there's a great friendship between these three people. They're out camping. I love all of that. Unfortunately, the script is tainted with some just terrible, terrible humor that pains me every time they say things. It's a very frustrating scene because I like so much the concept of it and it's burdened by the humor within it.
I agree with you 100%. Even before they get around the campfire, some of the humor around, that they start diving into when he's on the side of the mountain and Spock has his jet boots. The part where I start to deeply question the direction of the film is the anti-gravity ankle catch. which hurts me. It hurts me every time I see it. And as Kirk is upside down, and so is Spock, even though we've already seen that the jet boots have the jets coming out of the bottom. And that makes me crazy. Maybe it's a silly thing, but it makes me crazy. I actually, though, I think what this sequence sets up is that Shatner actually has a really good eye. The shots that he chooses really are quite good. He's very strong. I think he's got a good sense of what makes something visually interesting.
That's something I saw in this film, is that Shatner was doing stuff with his camera that Nimoy never did in his last two films. And I was thrilled to see Shatner playing around. He does zooms. He does some more interesting camera moves. He even does some split diopters throughout. I just found him to be a much more interesting director to watch, despite any issues that there might be within the story. He had a better visual sense.
I agree with that. When they get back to the ship, and there's the whole, oh my gosh, they're lost, and Chekhov is blowing into the communicator. Suddenly it's cleared up, and I find that whole sequence is pretty painful to watch, but it's nice to meet our characters again, right? This gets us back into the rest of the crew. I really like what is going on the ship. I love the fact that the ship is falling apart, and mostly because I love the way Kirk interacts with it, right? His little throwaway lines are some of my favorite lines in the films. Anything work around here? Or, just those little things. I miss
my chair.
I miss my chair, right? Those are great. Those are great little bits of just texture. And again, I so like the set of this particular bridge and this particular Enterprise that I'm gratified to be there. I don't like things such as, close up, top, high angle on the captain's log. And it's a piece of computer equipment that literally is held together by springs and starts popping apart. I find that little bit of visual gaggery very upsetting.
Yes, that's one word for it.
It's very upsetting. But then we go to Paradise City. And Paradise City is, never was there a greater hive of humorless scum and villainy than at Paradise City, which is essentially Paramount backlot extras and remains set pieces all piled up. I have a lot of problems with Paradise City.
There are a lot of problems. The Catwoman creature.
Yes, Catwoman creature
is the first thing that really just sets me off.
Let's talk about the three representatives: the Klingon, the Romulan, and the human representatives.
This Paradise City, we should say, is on Nimbus 3, which is in the neutral zone.
Yes, and so we have these three representatives from each of these races, and they come together supposedly to search for galactic peace, as a representation of galactic peace, and they are really terrible representatives of their race.
Well, and I was a little confused why they were there in the first place. Are they there because they weren't really there to have a big powwow or anything, right? It's just
I thought that was the idea, was that originally they were this body was set up to have that sort of powwow, but it has devolved into just a paralyzed, political waste of time, and so they just show up to drink and trade, and they're essentially criminal element now.
But it's not like a meeting,
criminals.
because David Warner. And as Talbot and the Klingon Cord, they've been there forever, it seems. So I was like, why?
They've been there forever.
Let's just say poorly written element of the script.
It was a poorly written element of the script, but they're also terrible representatives of their races in the Star Trek universe. Like the Romulan, that she's the worst Romulan ever, right? There is no, that's not a Romulan. Yeah. Maybe they were still sort of stretching their legs with who Romulans are, but I think we knew at that point she's no Romulan.
Yeah.
There was no giggling. So that was trouble. We do have a bit of the speechifying about the history of planetary agreements, and that's the kind of justifying why they're there, and that's on the part of David Warner, and that's a part that I get very frustrated with, just because I get tired of them so quickly. The general is, he's fine. He's sort of inconsequential until the end. The rest of Paradise City it's just a lot of that same kind of humor.
Yeah, it's a dumb bar. It's just got dumb people in it. It's just a very frustrating place that it just felt very cheap. Everything about it felt cheap.
So we already called out the pool table that's actually a pool. Didn't land well. You talked about the Catwoman with 3 breasts, who apparently is a lightweight, because Kirk deadlifts her and throws her across the room over his head.
Well, and apparently, as soon as a cat touches water, that
dies.
Kills her.
Yeah.
Because I was a little perplexed as to why that was it. It was over.
No, she drowned face up in a pool that's 2 inches deep.
The pool table.
Yeah, the pool table. Mm-hmm.
And then we have the fan dance, Pete. Uhura's fan dance. And according to Lowry, he said that he threw that out as a joke because he and Harv and Shatner were sitting around trying to figure out how to distract these guys, and he threw it out as a joke, and they were both like, "Yes, that's a great idea." But according to somebody else, who's the other person who said it was someone else's idea? It's like I don't think anybody wanted to take credit for that idea.
This week on the Saturday Matinee, Andy's list is top 18 better ways to distract Paradise City than Uhura's fan dance.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
dear.
Terrible. What about Uhura and Scotty, though? We haven't really settled on that.
Okay, so, I mean, they're established as buddies at the beginning when, they're sharing dinner or whatever. But that's just like buddies. And then all of a sudden, Uhura, after she's kind of taken under Cybok's spell, apparently it releases the inner love that she's been hiding for Scotty, and it turns into something crazy, which, is one thing and certainly is an item for humor, or one type of humor, I guess you could call it. It doesn't work for me. But the thing that really drives me crazy about it is that it's not even resolved. When we get to the end of the film, it's like it's never brought up again. If you're going to introduce something like that, you have to close that loop.
But what this does give us, Andy, if you look up the collected works of Sad Spock Panda, there is a delightful page called The 5 Times Scotty and Uhura Acted Like a Couple and the One Time They Finally Became One, a 5-in-1 fluffy fic of Scotty and Uhura becoming a couple, actually written for the new Star Trek kink meme. That's right, the actual fan fiction completes the story of Uhura and Scotty hooking up.
I knew fan fiction would circle back into this. Well, not to, we have blue unicorns, which it's funny because they mentioned to Roddenberry that, hey, what about having some unicorns? And he adamantly was opposed to having unicorns in the script or in this film because he said, that's fantasy. We're not doing fantasy here. And people know unicorns are fantasy. Yet they still somehow got it by him. Okay, we'll paint them blue, but they still have a horn on their head, but it's not a unicorn.
But it's a wee horn.
Yeah, it's like, what? Oh, okay, that's okay then.
It's not a horn, it's a callus.
It's like callus. Oh dear, yes. So we have those, and of course, apparently Spock can do the Vulcan neck pinch on them too.
See, now I had no problem with that.
I actually don't either.
No problem.
It's just funny. And then there's the row your boat bit, Pete.
Yeah, no, I don't like that either.
No.
But there is a purpose to it, right? I mean, if you look at it from us being able to celebrate what these three guys represent to one another, which you and I have been talking about over the course of the last, 4 movies before this is really a story about these three guys and the id, ego, superego that is, Kirk, McCoy, Spock, and this is how we're going to express it in this film. We're going to express that relationship this way. To what end?
It's one of the strengths of the film is really kind of watching the relationship between these three kind of have some friction as Cybok kind of tests them a little bit and works at pulling them apart a little bit. I think that's really interesting. I don't think the row your boat bit at the beginning and end help it in any way. Although it is nice to see them just kind of, hanging out and being comrades and friends. I like all of that. So to that end, I guess that's what they're going for. I just don't think that was the strongest way to do it.
But what's more interesting, though, is to me, a better example exploring that relationship is when they're all in the brig.
Actually, I think you're right, because it really, I'd go before the brig. I think their relationship, I found it really start having some interesting moments of exploration after they crash the shuttle into the hangar bay. Just a beautiful scene. It's beautifully lit.
Yes.
Just a gorgeous set. Everything about it is just incredible. And then you have this fantastic moment where Kirk gets a couple chances at getting Cybok, and he doesn't. As he and Cybok struggle, the gun falls and it lands over by Spock, who picks it up and points it at Cybok. And Kirk's just like, shoot him. and Spock can't. And it's really interesting. And it creates such interesting tension between Kirk and Spock. I was like just really drawn in by the power in everything that was going on between the two of them from that point all the way through the whole scene in the brig, as they're struggling with this relationship and the reveal that Sybok is his brother and everything. Like, it's just like such great stuff. And you've got, Kirk incredibly frustrated with Spock, McCoy frustrated with Kirk because he doesn't see that Spock couldn't kill his brother. There's just so much tension between the three of them. It's just, for me, that was one of the strongest bits in the whole film.
I absolutely agree. With the exception of the Morse code stand back, that was a little bit too camp for me. After such a rewarding sequence, I actually had problems with that. But almost after that, when their sequence when Sybok actually confronts them, and in that room, and is attempting to take away their pain. We get to see a side of McCoy that I think is unique so far in the films, that we actually get to experience a little bit of his history and see how he, how he deals with that sort of deep emotional the component through the death of his father, where he actually, carries around the guilt of having killed his father when it was actually, at the time it was,
a mercy killing.
A mercy killing when they found a cure, like 48 hours later, which it would be hard to take. It would be hard to take. And I really liked that piece of it. But ultimately,
and how they shot it.
Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make earlier. We were talking about the beautiful lighting in the hangar bay. I think the lighting in general, every place where we weren't on the bridge, because we spent so much time on the bridge, they took some real liberties with creative and beautiful lighting in really new parts of the ship, places we hadn't seen before, that I thought were fantastically engaging throughout.
Not to mention that the scene you were just talking about with McCoy and the mind meld where he re-experiences the death of his father, the way that they shot that was like theatrical work, where they actually had a scrim that was lit on one side. It looks like a wall, and when then they changed the lights and they turned the lights off on the wall and they turn up the lights on the stuff behind it, all of a sudden you can see through the wall and you see this whole set where his father is. Like, that is just ingenious, the way to play around like that and come up with a cheap way to make this effect that worked really well.
Absolutely. It was smart. So there's a lot of stuff on this ship that I think is really good. And if you buy into the fact that there is this crazy cultist who has taken control of the ship and has been able to through his mind meldy power to sway the crew to his side, I think there's actually a lot to appreciate about this movie, and the sequences on the Enterprise.
And what I found so interesting is watching the story of Sybok and this power he has with people, and the power and just the belief, this incredibly strong belief he has that what he's doing is right, and he's on this quest to find God. I just found that so, I don't know, it really hit me this time. I really enjoyed the quest. And I was just like, how many films have we seen where it's from his perspective? He's the one that nobody believes, and he has to take them captive and prove that he's right. I mean, we've seen that a number of times in other films. And it's like, it's interesting to see it now from the other side of these people who are taken captive by this crazy guy who thinks he's right, and ostensibly is. I mean, he clearly had a vision, and it got him through the Great Barrier to this Shakari God planet. It just happens that the creature that's there is not God and is just some malignant spirit that's actually out to kind of take the ship and escape. I found it really fascinating, and I liked that here you have this antagonist that is out. He's not actually out to do harm. He's kind of just taking these people and forcing them to go on this journey with him because he thinks it's for the better of everybody. And in the end, he's kind of like broken and destroyed because of that. Now, could there have been more of him being broken and destroyed at the end of that? Absolutely. I was a little disappointed with his end and his turn very quickly to all of a sudden help them escape. It just felt like a cheap way to make it work for their escape.
Did it feel like about a $350,000 decision?
It pretty much. So, yeah.
Is that kind of what it felt like?
One of those sorts of things. But still, I liked what they were going for with it.
Deep Scene Dive is an easy one to find. Pretty much just press play.
The very first scene.
It is the very first scene. It's the first scene of the film. It is the scene where we meet the first of the Suede followers. We get a great tour of Nimbus 3 in the neutral zone, the planet of galactic peace. We cut back and forth between this series of close-ups of our first follower and this shadowy figure on a horse.
I found this to be an incredibly compelling open for this film. It's very mysterious. We don't really have a sense of what's going on here. We don't know who these characters are. It's not like it's starting with Kirk and Spock. It's a mystery. It's a pre-credit sequence, which we really haven't had yet in Star Trek.
Right.
And that's very exciting. I really liked this open because it sets up an incredible mystery for us, and it sets up a really unique character. We get this character who is this Messiah who is kind of riding up toward this guy in this very Terry Gilliam-esque slow-mo ride with like whispering sounds coming behind him and stuff. It very much felt like the Fisher King to me.
Totally.
And then this figure on this planet in the neutral zone, which is planet of galactic peace, they, as we learn later, they're not allowed weapons, and so what they have done is they've kind of concocted their own weapons. So here he is trying to load his gun that shoots rocks at people, which I thought was really interesting. And, this guy is like digging holes in the ground. And you're like, what on earth is this person doing? I don't know. I was so intrigued by the open of this film. I was intrigued from the moment that Cybok hopped off the horse and kind of healed him. And just kind of this moment of this connection between the two as this person is just like, what have you just done to me with your intense stare at my soul? I found that really interesting. And then you get this kind of awkward reveal of the Vulcan ears as he pulls his hood back, and then he kind of starts laughing, and it's not, I don't know, I was a little, I'm not as connected to the Star Trek universe as some, but I know Vulcans are generally kind of humorless people, and so I was like, okay, well, that's kind of odd. I guess it threw me out a little bit. And I don't think that's what they were intending to do. But I think for Star Trek fans, it probably irked them a little bit.
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you want out of the movie, right? I mean, I feel like when I first saw it, I was really frustrated because they've spent a lot of time telling us here's who Vulcans are, and whenever we see Vulcans that are outside of this context, it's through some other universe, right? We have Dark Spot, or when they go into other timelines, we explored that a little bit in the show. But generally, the Vulcans as those who have given up emotion in favor of logic and peace, that's what we expect. And so to have this guy start laughing, I feel like that is the first fork in the road. If you can get past that with a spirit of curiosity about what could they possibly be doing here, what story could they possibly be trying to tell by hanging me out on this ledge and testing my faith in who Vulcans are, if you can move past that, then you might stand a chance of enjoying kind of what this story represents. But there were a lot of folks who still can't. I mentioned it to a friend of mine who, that we were doing the show, and he turned around and said, "Ugh, Vulcan laughter." That's still a sore point. I think that's very real. I did not have that problem this time. I found myself more curious about it. Also, because I think Lawrence Luckinbill is great. in this. He's so big and
Yeah.
charismatic, and I think he's just he is a really interesting figure on screen, and he is worth giving that level of attention, even through a terrible script. He's worth giving some attention.
Well, and here's a problem, or here it's a central issue with the script, is that they have these things, and I didn't know that there was this history with Vulcans where they used to be much more emotional, and
Yes.
then they chose to take this shift. I don't know where that line was created. When did that happen in the the chronology of this storytelling?
Yeah, we already knew that.
Okay, so it was out there. I think a lot of people probably forgot that was out there. I could have used a reminder that was out there, and I hardly know
That's what
anything
we're
about
getting
Vulcans.
to.
That's what I'm
we're
getting to.
Yeah.
Is they could have used a better setup for the fact that, hey, Vulcans used to be big gigglers.
Yeah.
They call them those gigglers over there, but not anymore. And I think that's something that they could have used to set this up better. Because there's no setup for it. And all of a sudden you have this Vulcan who just starts laughing and it's like, what? I don't understand. And I think that's the issue I have. As the story went on, I was like, oh, okay. So there's this history with Vulcans, and because they start talking about that and how he took this other path and went this other route. I'm like, okay, I get it now. But it took me until later in the film to get it. And I'm okay with that in a lot of contexts, but when it's something like this that they've set up so well beforehand, all of a sudden it kind of throws me a little bit. I'm not saying I had a big issue with it like some Star Trek fans did. I'm just saying it kind of threw me for a minute. Like, I don't understand this now.
I guess it's not like there was a single episode that said, hey, this is ancient. In ancient times, Vulcans were happy people. But I do see your point, but I also think that we have a bit of a setup around Vulcans and the purging of emotions through, like, Kolinar, and we established that in I think the motion picture, and then in the Search for Spock, and so they sort of have been teasing at this at the way, not when Vulcans got rid of emotion, but the fact that there does exist an emotional undercurrent in a Vulcan, right? That is, I think, what they were leveraging in this movie, that in fact we know enough about the fact, even from the cinematic universe of Star Trek, that there is enough of understanding that there is emotion inside of Vulcans that we can move forward, and that this will be counter to our understanding.
I think that the masses who understand Vulcans, who don't know all of the history and haven't read all of this sort of stuff and didn't pay that close attention in the other movies. I'm not naming names, but I'm just saying in the masses,
Yes.
who might have missed all of this. It's a little confusing because, they might not have gotten that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. But what's really funny is that what my understanding of Vulcans and emotion is that the emotion generally is violence, right? That and we have a number of instances in the original series where Spock and McCoy, my people gave up emotion, because it always led to war, something violent. Like we shunned violence, and what was left was logic, and so what we have in Sybok is a Vulcan who laughs, and that's never something that we've been introduced to. So all this talk about emotion is it's fine, even if we have angry, violent Vulcans. We've never had giggling Vulcans or giggling Romulans. So this is the movie with all of the giggling.
Right.
Yeah. And
they
and
wanted
we're talking
humor.
About more
I'll
about
throw in humor.
Right. So anyway, belabored that point, I think probably too long. So where does that take us in the Laughing Vulcan? So the Laughing Vulcan is a real point in this, and that is the opening sequence, right? That is That's it. If you can't make it past this, the whole movie is sunk.
Well, and that's why this is such an interesting scene, because it really sets up a lot of the pros and cons within this film. You know, a really fascinating mystery that also might be burdened by something that is going to be really hard for people to get past, and it could really set up, you know, kind of create this divisive element for people to move forward.
So compare Sybok and John, the character, his first follower,
Rex Holman.
Rex Holman. Compare their experience looking face to face, head to head, with Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver when they're doing their "I'm going to look intently at you, and we're going to use the Force on each other's heads." Which one do you buy more?
Well, there are a lot of elements at work,
but it's really the same scene.
It's kind of, yeah. I would probably go with Daisy and Driver. But I do think Luckenbill has this really great look as he's kind of looking at somebody. Like, I really just got a sense that I bought this entire thing going on between Sybok and John as he was like, or is it John or John?
On.
I really bought it. I really connected with it. It really kind of was, I thought, a really powerful moment, just seeing how just this moment that Sybok has with this man, all of a sudden this man is like breaking down and is just like, what do you need me to do? I thought that was really interesting. I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that this guy instantly kind of turned and gave up his life digging holes in the dirt to join him.
You know what? Ironically, he's a moisture farmer.
Whoa.
Never saw that coming.
Universes really do cross.
Rex Holman, you already mentioned. He also played Morgan Earp in the original series episode. It was one of the later episodes, Spectre of the Gun, where the crew was condemned to the losing side of a recreation of the gunfight at the OK Corral. Morgan Earp.
Was that when they were worried that all of the Western TV shows were beating them?
Yes,
ratings
right.
wise?
So now we're a Western TV show. Yes. And Lawrence Luckenbill as Sybok, they wanted Sean Connery.
I thought that was interesting. He was doing Indy 3, as I already said.
Yeah. I'm not sure that would have been a better casting.
And Luckenbill, Shatner saw him doing a one-man performance, one-man show of kind of, I guess, the life and story of LBJ.
LBJ, yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. And, thought he could do it. And I think Luckenbill is a really compelling actor to watch. And I don't know if I've seen him in much, but I really enjoyed him as Sybok.
What else was he in? Now that you've asked
Messenger Cocktail. He was in Cocktail.
He was in Cocktail. That's true. Boys in the Band. He's got 50 credits.
Yeah, a lot of TV stuff, not much that I've seen.
Yeah. You have a central question here, another lore question, right? Are Vulcans stronger than humans?
I didn't realize it was a lore question, but it seems that he is really strong.
Yes.
When he and Kirk are fighting, like he commands that battle as much as Kirk. In fact, I would argue that he holds his own against Kirk better than Khan did in the TV episode where Khan and Kirk were fighting, because Kirk really took Khan down pretty well in that fight, I'd say.
Yeah. I think Sybok is to Kirk as Kirk is to three-breasted cat girl.
I think you're probably right.
Okay.
I'm glad we have that comparison.
Vulcans are stronger than humans.
Okay.
So, camera. Andrew Laszlo again.
Yeah, his work in this opening scene, again, we've got some nice moves as the camera's kind of moving in on people and everything. Just fantastic moments. They had some wind machines out on this desert where they were filming, and just created just a beautifully haunting landscape as they were kind of blowing this sand everywhere, just as it was whipping around, particularly Sybok as he's kind of riding up in slow motion on his blue unicorn. It really... it was really powerful. It was like gorgeous imagery all through.
I think so too. Great use of location, great use of that, that great old tree. I love the color tone of the opening sequence. I love the sort of jaundiced feel that we get of it. I mean, it really adds to the desperation of the sequence. I love that it's super burnt out, right? I mean, the highlights are so bright that it's just really lovely.
You know, what's funny that you mentioned the tree is They had a lot less time to shoot this whole scene than anticipated originally because that tree was delivered to the wrong location. You know who I hold at fault for that?
Yes,
Executive
I do.
producer Ralph Winter.
Yeah, that's too bad because that tree is a charismatic bit.
It needed to be there. It really is a beautiful bit for this.
The location for this is Owens Lake, California, and if you Google Map Owens Lake and do the satellite view, boy, it still looks just like this.
Hasn't changed much.
Hasn't changed a bit. And so we should take a road trip to the middle of Owens Lake.
We'll do our next show there.
Production design, Herman F. Zimmerman. I think this his first.
This is his kickoff, and he becomes quite the name in this franchise. Actually, this is his first film credit. He had actually done the first season of Next Generation, I think, right before this.
Right.
But I mean, really, from that point and this point moving forward, he essentially is the look and feel of Star Trek, right?
Yeah, between him and Michael Okuda, who does all of the graphics, who developed the visual language of the film, those two guys really have ultimately owned the look of Star Trek. And so when I say like this is what I love, this is the era I love, it's because of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, Zimmerman. After this, he works on the films, I think, all the way through, is it Nemesis, or did he end up working on, no, he didn't go, he didn't last past that. But he did, what's that other TV show? Deep Space Nine and Enterprise.
Yep. Yeah. All 98 episodes of Enterprise too. And that was a really interesting one. See, now we should do a whole show on every episode of forget it. But yes, he did do Nemesis, Insurrection, Generations, First Contact.
Yeah, he did the whole
next gen
film
stuff.
franchise. Yeah.
So quite a legacy. And of course, we have Jerry Goldsmith.
Boy, I tell you, he's going to be back in our conversations as we jump back into some of these later Star Trek films. But his music here is just so strong. I mean, he did the original motion picture, and here he is back in the fold, finally doing some really great music. Just the stuff that he develops all through this, and the stuff that he has for the God Planet, and just beautiful, beautiful pieces. And the bit that he opens the film with is just very haunting. It fits the tone and feel exactly. It's just what we needed to kick this film off with.
Well, and I would add to that, listen to the cue change when we move from this sequence into the Yosemite stuff for one of the most beautiful context shifts, like a dramatic context shift, but the music just leads you right into it. It's perfect.
Well, and he's got when we go into the title sequence and we actually have kind of the build, that fantastic theme that he developed back in the motion picture,
right,
as it builds and we get the final title pops up and everything. He does that incredible, I don't know what it is, that instrument. It's like a blaster sort of whoop that he incorporates so well into his music. And his Klingon stuff is just so stinking good. That's probably why I'm so in love with the Klingons in this film, because Goldsmith's music for them is just so good.
So, Andy, I did not know. I have long fantasized about having a marshmallow dispenser, and then you found it.
That's right, man.
I didn't even know that this was a thing. And now it's all I can think about.
I can't imagine how many people bought into it as far as kind of a tie-in, a product tie-in with Star Trek V. But Kraft thought it was a good idea.
They did, to develop something that looks like the thing that Spock had. And while Spock's actually manufactured, it was a little food replicator, it actually made marshmallows. The Kraft marshmallow dispenser actually let you carry 3 marshmallows.
Because who doesn't need to be carrying marshmallows?
I need to be carrying, yes. And I love the point that this is Junk Ball, I think Junk Ball Media, is that right? Made in the video, that in fact, what is a better container than the Kraft marshmallow dispenser, the bag that the Kraft marshmallows came in. And I would concur, this looks ridiculous, but I want one. So if anybody has a lead on this thing, Count me in.
eBay.
eBay, baby. That's right. We do have some more reuse from previous films.
Oh yeah, Starfield's ships. The shot revealing the Enterprise as it comes over the Excelsior.
So frustrating.
Well, and this is going to be something we'll see in future films because they certainly love to do that.
They love to do that. That's right. Yeah. And we have a callback to a film I never thought we would see in a Star Trek.
Who'd have thunk it, right? Yeah. Apparently the set for the hangar bay. The only way that they were able to actually build the set to the size and scope that they really were wanting to is because the stage that they were going to build it on already had a huge set on it, and they were able to adapt that set for Star Trek of all things. That set was the Zamunda Palace set from Coming to America. So watch the hangar scene and just think about Eddie Murphy and James Earl Jones as they're hanging out watching people dance in the Zamunda Palace.
Love it. And this shuttle cam thing.
I like that they're keeping consistent with the fact that the cameras that we are seeing things from, like the shuttle cams, are things that are completely illogical. Like when the shuttle lands on the planet and the crew on the Enterprise is watching the footage of these people, it's like the camera that comes on the shuttle cam is way off to the side in a position where, there's no part of the shuttle that even hangs over there, but apparently that's where it is. And they're watching it. I'm like, where is this camera coming from?
The where is this camera coming from angle in Star Trek is something that has never been answered to my satisfaction, Andy. It has never been answered, and it never will be. That is true. How'd this do at awards season?
Fan fiction, Pete.
Someone's done it. Yeah. It's some crazy GoPro fan fiction.
All right.
How'd this do in award season?
This film had 4 wins and 3 other nominations. When I say 4 wins and 3 other nominations, Pete, it's, with quotes around it. It actually had, of those 7 nominations, 6 of them were for Razzies. That's right. Everybody loves the Razzie nominations. This film was nominated for 6 of them. It won 3. It won Worst Picture of the Year, Worst Actor, William Shatner, and Worst Director, William Shatner. I think that he probably was a little hurt by this. It lost, and I guess you could say that's a good thing. It lost Worst Supporting Actor for DeForest Kelley, which surprised me. But he lost, and he lost to Christopher Atkins. I don't even know who that is. In Listen to Me, actually, Christopher Atkins was in what was that? The Blue Lagoon.
Oh my goodness, that's right.
And it lost Worst Screenplay to Harlem Nights. Eddie Murphy wrote that one. And it also, this is an interesting Razzie category. Worst Picture of the Decade.
Wow.
Why don't the Oscars incorporated that? The Best Picture of the Decade. But no, they have the Worst Picture of the Decade. But it lost to Mommy Dearest, of all things. So
Christopher Atkins was also in The Pirate Movie with Christy McNichol.
Did he win a Razzie every year he's been in a movie?
He is, Andy, I'm not kidding. He is in 3 movies that are in post-production for 2017. He's actually in, I think, 4 movies that are filming or in post-production still scheduled for 2016. I look forward to that. Guy's got 85 credits.
Busy man.
Yes.
I like the stuff that he's working on. Defrost, the virtual series.
And how to do in the box office, because that's I hear from Shatner that eventually this ended up roughly with the other movies. Is that true?
I like that he said that.
Right.
I like that he believes that for himself.
Well, he also said it as hearsay. As the director,
he hears.
I hear eventually it kind of evened out.
Well, he was given $33 million for his directorial entry into this series. Oh, and speaking of, I liked how Harvey said, we like to call this one, it was Bill's turn. So dismissive.
Terrible.
Anyway, he was given $33 million, which is about $64 million in today's dollars. The movie was the sole opener on June 9th, 1989, opening at number 1 before it was quickly dislodged its second week by Ghostbusters 2, and the following weekend, I think, by Batman. So it was a rough summer for it. The movie wasn't the box office hit that its predecessors were, making $52.2 million domestically and $17.9 million internationally, for a total of $136.2 million in today's dollars. That is less than half what Voyage Home made. The movie did end up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $674,500. So it still was a financial success, but it is the lowest on our list thus far.
Andy, this is the first time that in going through these original Star Trek movies where I thought, here is one that I would actually like to see remade.
Yeah.
I would. I think that this is an idea that deserves another execution. And I almost said a more sophisticated execution. And I think there is something to that, just in terms of fixing the humor, the humor dial. It's busted. It was just busted. Fixing the script. But this is a movie that is culturally resonant, that offered in much more to the eye, that I think people stopped looking at because they walked away from the script. And obviously the script has problems, but I think they let that get in the way. I think the mass market let that get in the way. And I think the Razzie tally is testament to this, of some things that are going on in this movie that are actually really interesting. And my last point is how cool is it that we are looking at a movie, a series that's not finished yet, that is an action movie of all of these guys in their 60s.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, we're celebrating along with these action heroes that are getting to be, old men. That this is not the kind of movie that would be made right now on the strength of this cast. They are still entertaining to watch, and it's still Star Trek. So there's a lot of forgiveness that goes on for me.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is forgiveness that goes on, too. I'm not as much a Star Trek fan as you are, but I found a lot more to like in this film than dislike this go-around. And I was really surprised by that, because I just remembered being so frustrated with it beforehand. And so I was really happy to see that, wow, there is actually a really good movie here that unfortunately is just buried under some of the worst moments in Star Trek so far. Yeah. And it's very frustrating. But I still really liked it. Like, I walked away going, this actually is a really compelling story, and I would love it to have been given the chance to be done properly. Listening to some of the Star Trek, the fans and the people involved in one of the commentaries, they said this is the Star Trek film that, of the 6 original films, they feel is the most close to an original episode of the first series. They said this feels like an actual something that Gene Roddenberry would have told.
Well, yes, and I think largely because of the end.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting thing to look at. And so, I don't know, there are so many elements within this film that will frustrate me to my dying day, but I will watch this again. Like, I was so compelled watching this. I actually found myself thinking about it a lot, going, this was a really interesting film. And I would definitely not say at this point, watching 5 movies so far, it's not the bottom of my list.
That may be the most fascinating thing you've said.
Oh,
I did not see that coming. Yes, it is also not at the bottom of my list. I am with you. I think it's time for us to actually rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel and you'll see our list of films. But if you really just want to get serious, swipe over in your podcasty device, and you can just click on the word Flickchart. It'll take you right over to this movie. Let's see how well it holds up.
All right, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, or Hot Fuzz? I have to go Hot Fuzz.
Well, yeah.
Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Star Trek V.
I would, between the two problematic films, I would say Baron Munchausen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would, but I'm such a Star Trek fan.
Sure, no, I get it.
So I'm going to have to defend it.
That's fine. Let's do it.
All right.
I'm totally fine with Star Trek V winning this, but I still would pick Baron Munchausen.
Okay.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Paper.
Scissors. Sorry.
That's all right.
Star Trek V or Gone with the Wind?
Oh, Star Trek V. Oh,
I would,
Andy.
Yeah, No, I'd say Star Trek 5.
Okay.
I would say Gone with the Wind has a lot of stuff going for it. I actually think it's probably the better film. There's a lot of stuff that I really dislike about that film now, having rewatched it.
Yeah.
I get very frustrated with that film now. I get frustrated with Star Trek 5, but I still think it's a more compelling film.
Yes.
There you go. Star Trek 5 or From Hell, more recent film.
I'm going to say Star Trek 5.
I am too.
All right.
Star Trek 5 or Clute. I'm going to go with Clute.
I will go with Clute as well.
Star Trek 5 or Spies. Early Fritz Lang.
Star Trek 5.
I would say Spies, but I'm okay giving you Star Trek 5.
All right.
Star Trek 5 or Seconds. Definitely Seconds for me.
Oh, I think I'm Star Trek 5 on this one.
Oh,
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
1, 2, 3. Paper.
Scissors.
Again? Really?
Well, that puts it at 250 out of 314 on our list.
All right. And where does this hit on your personal list?
This was a really interesting one for me. Before I watched it, it sat in the bottom 3% of my flick chart. It was at 3693 out of 3814. After rewatching it, I'm not convinced this is the right spot, but this is where it's sitting right now. It's at 1324. Which puts it in the top 35%.
Wow.
And it puts it ahead of Star Trek 3, which I think is the right place in my Star Trek list so far.
Well, that's actually really interesting. I find that gratifying. I can't tell you right now exactly where mine shows up next to Star Trek 3 just this second. I will. But mine is at 312 on my flick chart out of 996, which is, what does that make it?
31%.
Which is right about 31%, which feels pretty good. Star Trek 3 is at 280 on my list. So Star Trek 3 still managed to get up there. I think it's because I ran into $1 Million Baby when I ranked it earlier.
For me, I really got hung up on the whole idea between the two. The more we thought about the Genesis planet and talked about that in Star Trek 3, the more frustrated I got. And I just found I also got frustrated by the idea of, the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. And there were issues that I found in Star Trek 3 that I had never had before. And so this time I found Star Trek 5 has a much more compelling story going for it. It has a lot more problems, but I think the strengths of it for me outweigh the strengths of Star Trek 3.
Yeah, I can see that. How'd this land on your Letterboxd review? Letterboxd.com/thenextreel.
I gave it 3 stars, which is the same ranking that I actually gave to Star Trek 3. They're just really close, I guess.
Yeah, it's a 3-star for me too.
And I liked it.
Yeah, definitely a like. And I think I don't know that I'm necessarily going to become ardent supporter of everybody needs to watch this film before they watch the others, but it is like you said, it's not the lowest of my Star Trek movies. What are we doing? Where do we go from here?
Well, we are going to be jumping to the next one, Star Trek 6. Yeah, this one came out 2 years later, 1991. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, and the official last film of the original team.
Well, I really look forward to that.
I do too. And for those of you who are Patreon subscribers, you'll be able to tune in to our Saturday matinee this weekend as we do our lists of our 3 favorite cult films, or not cult films, films featuring cults, I should say.
Yes, charismatic cult leaders, cult. Yes, very different. Very different. We'll just call them cult films for now. Let you discover that as we go forward. I'll tell you, Andy, I'm really glad we did this movie. I was nervous going in, but I feel much better now because when the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Nero says, why bother with this movie in his 1-star review? This DVD case measures 3/4 of an inch thick compared to the standard 1/2 inch thick.
Whoa.
This movie is a joke. It really is just a complete parody of itself. They basically journey to the Great Barrier at the center of the universe to visit God. This movie should have been handled so much better than this. There is no pride in this movie. The beginning of the movie, where Kirk, Spock, and Bones are singing around a campfire, sets the tone for this piss-poor excuse of a Star Trek movie. I don't remember why I bought this movie.
Wow.
It's a joke. I don't remember why. But I think the really critical perspective is centers really around the DVD case. I don't understand that.
I think that's a brilliant little addition, though.
We should dig in on that. Yeah.
Give you more. I changed mine, Pete.
Oh, dear.
Surprise, surprise. I'm doing a 2-star by Lola Jones.
Oh, excellent.
Who says odd-numbered Trek movies. If you are a Trekkie, you won't like this movie, but you'll maybe watch it because it's free. Surf the web while you're watching or doing some other distracting activity, and you may make it to the end.
Oh,
a little bit of advice from Lola
There's some
Jones.
Shopping advice on how to best take in the movie. I like it.
And how to watch it because it's free. You got to watch it when it's free.
Sure.
Otherwise, don't bother.
Sure you do, Lola. Sure you do. Thanks. I got a bagel with Nutella. It's got my name all over it.
Oh, God. Sounds awful. I love Nutella. I love bagels, but blending them together.
What else would you possibly put Nutella on? What do you put Nutella on?
I put it on a crepe with bananas.
Or that is toast. Also good. And toast is... What is the difference between toast and a bagel?
Bagel's boiled.
What?
Yeah, you boil a bagel. That's how they make bagels.
I know how you make... Of course I know how you make a bagel. Andy, once you put it in the toaster, it's just toasted bread.
Oh.
It's like a donut, which has been boiled in oil. Also bread.
Mm-hmm.
I would put Nutella on a donut.
Would you? You'd also put bacon on a donut.
I would do that too. I know it's because I haven't eaten today, but you are making me really mad right now.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in Season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy. And East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.